So we made it to the end. Here we are at the last lecture of the class. This one's about activism itself, because you're going to need to know this for your last project too, is how to become an activist, which is something I hope you do become and something that I hope you are already. But if you aren't already, I hope this is something that you consider, like whether it be in civic voices and digital spaces or become in physical spaces where you take actual action. And so today we're going to just talk about what these things mean. And so what I really want you to do is just understand the different ways you can get involved. As I go through my PhD, I find that a lot of my colleagues and my coworkers and my other students that are with me are very much in the activism sense. And we're there because, one, there's a lot to be activist about. And I think one of the biggest activisms that you should be involved with is student loan debt. That's my personal one that I stand behind. Is I hate the fact that after students graduate, they still have to carry that burden. They have to carry it, and it really withholds them from participating in the economy. And how the marketplace of both ideas and a monetary economy becomes stifled by the idea that you can't really move forward by being attached to a debt that may or may not have a return on investment. The return on investment, of course, comes from your ability to become employed. And that ability to become employed doesn't always become something that's part of how we do things in school. So a lot of that is disparate. So I find that my classmates are very much part of that. Second, you don't really get paid as a student. And so if you're in a grad school, you're really doing that you're trying your best to put together an investment for the future that you're hoping does pay out. But I also found that activism isn't something that you really turn off. Once you become an activist, you pretty much just are one all the time. And so one time I remember I was in a conversation, I was fighting for some rights, and somebody said to me, you don't have to be an activist all the time. And that's when I realized I was an activist. So I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. So while I may not do some of the things I'm going to talk to you about today, I know that my activism is a stance that I have, and that's something that I keep as my values. And this is important for you to understand too, that we don't all have to agree. We could have all different ideas. We could fight for our different ideas, but you should have some sort of value system, something you believe in and no one can take away from you, because that's what makes you you. So while we don't have to have the same side, at least have something that is a core value and understand why it's a core value that you have. Understanding why you have that core value helps you understand what it means to be part of the bigger sphere and to understand part of the objective reality that we all share. Sure, we're all subjective in this one zone where we each have our own version of our realities, but we do all live together and we all do have some sort of human right that we do share. And so while we might be on our own, that shareability of our rights, the ability to express ourselves, the ability to have rights given to us upon birth are shared. We all get the same ones. And so we should know that that's a part of it. So we call that reflexivity, which is the understanding of other people's ideas and why they have them, but also the ability to have that type of conversation. So here's some ways you can become involved. And this is really important because I think there's a handful of different ones, and I'm going to break them down. So the first and foremost one is the Civic Voices one. That's what I made you do with these vlogs and why I want you to make vlogs, is because it's about knowing how to educate other people. If you know how to educate other people, it helps you explore how to articulate ideas better. Each and every time you become better at it. And as you become better at it, you understand that it's something that you are really, really good at doing. And then eventually people will understand how to be on your team. So educating others is helping people get a real understanding of the objective reality. So one of the biggest other ones that you could do as an activist is actually physically go somewhere. Like go to town hall, go to the government, and literally advocate for laws. And you could do that by getting enough people together and use your First Amendment rights to become an advocate for a certain idea. And if you have enough people, you could create a petition, and that petition can move the government as part of your First Amendment rights. So here's a fun fact. Before 2008, you really only needed 5,000 signatures to get a petition to the government. And so you would have to go around and canvass. You'd have to go door to door and get signatures and send it in, and you could petition your local government or the federal government. But then when Obama took office, because of the internet, he changed it to 25,000. That you needed a fair amount of people to do that because it was much easier to get signatures using e-signature forms and digital signatures online. The problem was it was within seconds that people really wanted something like the Death Star. They actually petitioned the government, and Obama literally had to answer that question. So he changed it. It became 100,000 signatures to make any legislative change. And so that broke, I believe one of the first times it broke is when Justin Bieber caused some chaos in Florida and there was 100,000 signatures to deport him. Obama then used that response that he had to respond to in order to respond by saying, there should be a question about immigration policy. So he was able to pass that. But you are able to do that by advocating for legislation. Using the branches of our government, you have a say. It is a representational government, and therefore you can advocate for it. Now, if you want to be way, way, way more direct, you could run for office. Believe it or not, there's a lot of seats that are open and people aren't running for them. So you could literally run for your local office and work your way up. You could become literally part of the political system. If you really want to have a say, run for office. I mean, there's sometimes many good chances that you could actually win because sometimes positions are run and contested, or you're popular. You might just win that way. So that might be a life of politics you'd be interested in. Now, you could also use your First Amendment rights. And using your First Amendment rights, you can protest. And so remember, there's different ranges of protests. And so you can't just protest anywhere. Are you allowed to protest on public property whenever you want? Yeah. Anytime you want, you could stand out there, get a sign, and protest. But if you're obstructing traffic or obstructing certain things or creating a safety hazard, it is no longer protected and they could stop you from protesting. Which is why oftentimes you see marches get stopped because they're in roads and they can't be doing that without permission. So you can get permission to protest. Now here's one. Can you go to the Anselma room and start protesting anytime you want? The answer is no. Same answer because you can't count cards in a casino. The Anselma room is part of Molloy College, which is a private college, which means it's private property, which means you do not have First Amendment rights on the campus, which means you have to ask for those rights. In many cases, I'm sure they'd allow you to protest, but you can't just protest. You can't have that happen because it would actually cause some sort of chaos because they were unprepared. It's also private property. They could say, please stop doing that, and you'd have to stop or you get in trouble. Now, could you go across the street onto public property and on a sidewalk and do it? Sure. I mean, you could do that anytime you want. It would just be how you protest. You could use those First Amendment rights to do that. Now remember, it means peaceably assemble, not just assemble. So there's a big difference right away between what it means to be peaceable and non-peaceable. So don't cause any chaos and you could continue your protest. Now, two of the other ways is write a letter, which is why I'm making you write a formal letter to a cause. You could write letters to causes. You could write it directly to a campaign. You could write it directly to a government official. That's your way of getting involved too, to speak directly to your representatives. They are supposed to represent you, which means they are supposed to respond to you. I, for one, know that Kathleen Rice does respond. She's the congressperson for the district in which Molloy College is in. Many students have written to her in the past. She responds to them. And that's because her role as a congressperson is a representative government official, and she represents you. If you happen to live in her district, she's the person that's supposed to support your ideas. So you can write directly to them. And then for our project, I'm having you write a letter to a cause that already exists, but I'm having you write it because I really want you to understand that you could help a cause become better at what it is. And so that's imploring them to enhance their social media in one way or another. Okay, so now the big one, all right? So this is the one that I want to talk about, which is your campaign. So the big one is understanding how to put together a campaign. If you want to be an activist, you have to be passionate. You have to want to be an activist really bad. But you also need to be an activist that's so good that you don't just create the campaign, but you get somebody to follow the campaign. You have to understand a successful activism is really hard. To get somebody to physically get off their seat and go outside and do something for you or for a cause is difficult. Today, we often feel very busy and overwhelmed, and we often feel like we don't have time to do things. So if you could get somebody to break through that and say, I support this so strong that I will be out there with you, then you've done a good job. Even if you get somebody off their seat to write a letter or even take some sort of even collectivism or activism in digital spaces means you're a very successful activist. So for this last project, it really is that. I really just want you to put together a campaign about anything you want. You could campaign against the short lifespan of batteries. You could campaign about garbage waste in your town. You could pick anything you'd like. You could pick something that you feel is silly, like the flavor of coffee in the Anselma room. Don't actually do that one. I'd rather you didn't. But you could pick any of these things. Now, the hardest part here is getting people to follow it. So first, I want to show you this video about what it means to be the first follower, because I think that's important about what it means to be a leader and an activist leader in the first place.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is overglorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
So you can see it's not just about leadership. It's about leadership that causes other people to want to join in. And remember, sometimes the leader doesn't get the credit. And you have to know as an activist, you don't always get to walk away as the leader. Sometimes the first follower is the one that gets all the credit. And that first follower is the person that you have to really support as best as possible and let them understand that they are the person that will drive the cause forward. And that's okay because you're making a difference. And so for the project, it's actually fairly simple. You come up with the idea, you come up with a hashtag, like make it up. Like you have to come up with a campaign hashtag, whatever you want it to be. Make it short and simple. It really doesn't matter how long it is anymore, but make it short and simple that it could be shareable in digital spaces. I want you to come up with a graphic design, like a logo. What's your logo for it? You could hand draw it. You could use clip art or whatever, but take a picture of it and supply it. A lot of people, like I said, use a PowerPoint to hand this in. But the logo is pretty important because you want a brand to be shareable. The simpler, the better. I mean, think about how we run in our politics today. A simple phrase can move a lot of people to make a lot of action. Remember, making action is important. Getting people to the voting booth is just as important as anything. Being just civically active is important. 90 million people did not vote in the last election. Did not vote. They just simply did not go to the polls. So how do you activate 90 million people to actually go to the polls? 120 million people did, and more people were eligible, and they just didn't go to it. And they weren't going because they just didn't feel active enough to make that kind of a movement. Now that's very common in the United States. Less than 50% of eligible voters vote in almost every election, and midterms are even lower. So how do you get people to even just take that type of civic action? You have to get them to want to make change, or to believe, most importantly, that change does occur via the democratic process. And so that's what we are, part of the democratic process of this. So as an activist, you're basically considering how these things are connected to the larger sphere, from a small activism to a larger process that's all there with all your rights. And so afterward, then you also need to create like a very short video that basically causes people to join you. And that's through, you have to get them to join you through fomenting them. To foment somebody, it means to try to get some sort of rise, to get them to do something, to instigate them to movement. And so you need to foment some action. And in that fomentation, people will likely get agitated. I often try to do it when I'm in class by talking about the price of cheese in the installment room. Why is it 60 cents for every type? You go, oh my gosh, why am I paying 60 extra cents for every slice of cheese? Then you realize, oh wow, I just got angry about something that I'm not sure why of. And that's because you share some sort of innate anger towards it as well. Now, that said, anger is the easiest way to foment somebody, though not always the most successful. Sometimes it's important to understand people's shared beliefs and understand why they want to do certain things to be a good person who foments or is a good activist. To get somebody on your side isn't always to make them angry. Angry is short, very short bursts, and you have to keep it going. You need a lot of energy to keep people angry. If you keep people with an idea in mind and a clear goal, you could extend the length of your activism by a fair amount of time because people keep that in the back of their head. And that's the last point, which is, what does activism do? Activism really does what this class is about educating. Once you learn something, you become aware of it. And once you become aware of it, you really only have two choices. One, do something about it. Two, live with the guilt of not doing anything about it. It's really the only ways around get what you could do with an activist idea. So if you make somebody aware of something, you better give them a plan on how to use that activism. What do they do once they've become aware? A clear plan and concise goals are important to every activism plan. And if you include all these things together, you'll be great. And all I want you to do is very short video. I'm talking like 2.5 minutes max, because if you could do it in 2.5 minutes, you can do it. If it takes longer, it's too hard to make that activism. Remember, a good activist is somebody who could pretty much get somebody on their team in the length of an elevator ride, which is why they call it an elevator pitch. By the time that door opens, you want somebody to walk out and then turn around and say, you know what? No, I'm on your team. And there is your first follower. And once you've done that, you've created an activist out of your activism. So to be involved, I think, is very important. I think it's important because we have rights. We do. And we should use them because we have them. By not using them, it's kind of like a waste of everything that you have. You could go anywhere. But while you live here in the United States, or while you live in a place that gives you rights, you should be able to express those rights as much as humanly possible, because that's what you get. And by doing that, you're also looking forward to making change around the world and in any way possible. Whatever you believe in, you obviously want other people to believe in as well. And you never know what friends you'll gain from becoming an activist, or even what friends you'll lose. But you kind of figure out what is a stance and why you have that value. And also be willing to be open to change. Things change over time. Sometimes something that occurs in the past may not be what it stands in the future. So if you keep an open mind to change, you're also much better at being a good facilitator of ideas. I implore you into the future to go take these activism ideas, to do something and become part of the democratic process, to become part of the activist stance and become an educator yourself. Maybe not become a professor, but help people understand bigger ideas. The world is huge and it's always changing, and you have the ability to do these things. So use that power to do epic shit. Make things that are so awesome that people want to be part of it. Find that first follower and find that team and find everybody who could be around it. Take some of these lessons and take them with you wherever you go. And you are important as the movement themselves. And when you realize that power, you could do anything.